Oh, Amy, what is that beautiful glow that you're emitting? It's sweat. If you watch any UK YouTubers or follow any people from the UK on social media, all you will hear for the next few days is, "It's so hot! Why is it so hot? Sweating horribly, it's gross." Emma, would you like to show people your bow? Huh? Yes, you would. Come on then. Emma told me she wanted me to show you her bow. Oh, look. Look at the puppy. She's looking the wrong way. Hey. Look at her cute little bow. Oh. Because she has long hair, she needs her hair tying up to keep it out of her face. And I bought her some bows to go with her hair ties because it's just so cute. And I know there are going to be people telling me, "Oh my god, that's animal abuse. Why do you abuse your little puppy?" She loves it. It's her favourite part of the day. It's the first thing we do every morning. I come downstairs, she gets her little good morning cuddle, and then she gets her hair done. It's not really animal abuse, I promise. Mummy doesn't abuse me. So now that the important bit's out of the way, you may as well click off this video now. So like I mention all the time, I talk to a great community of people on Twitter who also suffer from borderline personality disorder. And I have various conversations with them, and mostly just sharing our experiences about our illness and learning more about it and how it affects each person differently. It's just, I think if we've been diagnosed with BPD, it's a really good place to start. There's a lot of information out there on the internet that can be very distressing to someone who's just been diagnosed. A lot of it is quite negative. One of the questions I ask people is, what subtype of BPD are you? And a lot of the time that question just gets a lot of confusion. People don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm going to get quite in depth about BPD in this video, so if you don't know that much about it, it might be worth watching the first video I made about BPD, which is titled All About Borderline Personality Disorder, and I will link it in the down bar for you to watch. But I think it would just make a lot more sense if you're not that clued up on it to watch that first, just so you get a general feel for what the illness is like for everyone. But if you didn't know, BPD is broken down into 4 different subtypes, and I'm not sure if this is recognised by all psychiatrists, but personally my psychiatrist first of all diagnosed me with borderline, and then he spent a bit more time trying to figure out which subtype I was. So I don't know if this might be a fairly new thing, and that might be why you've not heard of it before, but there are psychiatrists now who are also trying to work out which subtype you are. And I know that can be a bit confusing to understand, and I've been racking my brain this morning trying to figure out sort of a way to explain to people what I mean by a subtype, and the only thing I could come up with was, if you imagine BPD to be chocolate, chocolate is kind of an overall term that includes lots of different other chocolates. So you get milk chocolate, white chocolate, dark chocolate. It's very much the same for BPD. So each subtype carries its own set of characteristics and symptoms, much like milk chocolate tastes a lot sweeter than dark chocolate, that kind of thing, you know? It's all still chocolate, but it's slightly different. They share slightly different symptoms. Yes, I am going to keep using that analogy, so you're going to have to get used to it, I'm sorry. So the 4 different types are discouraged borderline, petulant borderline, impulsive borderline, which is what I am, and self-destructive borderline. Before I want to talk about all the different types, I just wanted to say that I'm not a psychiatrist myself. I'm not in any way a mental health professional. I'm just a girl who has a lot of spare time on my hands, and I suffer with this illness, and I have done a hell of a lot of reading about it and learnt a lot about it. If you think you might be one of these subtypes and you want your psychiatrist to diagnose you properly with one of these subtypes, then go and talk to your psychiatrist. Another thing I wanted to say is each of the groups, some of the characteristics in those groups can be a little bit, I don't know if disturbing is the right word. It's just that people with BPD can very much take the way the symptoms are worded in the wrong way, and it might hurt your feelings. Just try not to take it personally. And before I wanted to get into each one, I also just wanted to say that at any time in your life you can be one of the subtypes, more of the subtypes, or you might not even fit into any of these subtypes, and that's fine, that's normal. And you can also change over time as to which subtype you fall into. Just because you have this illness, it doesn't mean you have all of these symptoms, and even if you do, it's okay. You're completely normal for someone that does have this illness. And just remember, everything that you learn about yourself just brings you closer to recovery. And if a psychiatrist can put you into a specific subgroup that tells them more about you in particular, that's fantastic, because they can cater to your needs a little bit more specifically and tailor your therapy more to suit you. And also your behaviour can be a little more predictable for them, so they're not so much in the dark, they understand more about you. So the first subtype on my list to talk about is discouraged borderline. Now, people with discouraged borderline tend to isolate themselves from the world and cut off from everyone and try to avoid relationships, because although they do want relationships, they just feel like whatever they say or do is not good enough, and they're not worthy of someone else's time and affection. So they also feel like whatever they try to do in life, it doesn't matter how hard they try to do it, they're always going to fail. And when it comes to relationships, they can feel paranoid when they're the object of someone's affection, because it gets them into the mindset of thinking of, oh, why is this person showing me love and affection and giving me their time? I don't deserve it. I've done nothing to deserve this. If anything, they should hate me. That's the kind of thinking that they have. So it can make it very difficult when it comes to relationships, because on the one hand, they do feel a lot of loneliness and they do want to be with someone and have friends, but they just can't deal with the overwhelming thoughts and the paranoia all the time telling them that they're not good enough. So like I say, they can either completely reject these attempts of affection, or on the other side of it, there are people who they do get into relationships, romantic or not, it doesn't matter. It could even be with a parent or family member. They might push and push and push at that person, trying to get approval from them, basically, get compliments from the person so they feel better about themselves and more secure in the relationship. And of course, it's a difficult one, because it doesn't matter what someone says to you or how often they tell you exactly what you want to hear. There's always that beast in the back of their mind just telling them over and over and over again that they're not good enough, they don't deserve this, and that the people are just making these compliments up. So that's discouraged borderline. The next subtype on my list is petulant borderline. Petulant borderlines find it very, very hard to express themselves properly. They don't really know how to explain what it is that they want. So their way of speaking and their behaviour might come across as being quite passive aggressive. It's not supposed to. I can tell you that now because at times I do have these kinds of behaviours. A lot of the time you don't realise you're being passive aggressive, it's just the way your tone of voice comes out. And I've had it before in some videos that I've made where I might have asked Luke something and then I watch it back in the video and I think, my god, I spoke to you like shit. And at the time when I asked him that question, I didn't mean it to sound how it came across, and it's quite strange. So obviously it must be very confusing for people around someone that shows these characteristics. They can have a lot of issues with anger as well, and that all comes from the difficulty with expressing themselves. When you're trying to think all the time of how to explain what it is you want from a situation or something like that, you're thinking and trying to figure out how to get out what you want, that sometimes it just comes out in bursts of anger. Because they don't know how to express with words what they want, they can be seen to be manipulative of people and situations because they try and manipulate people into doing what they want with certain behaviours rather than explaining this is what I want. And I've seen it online on a couple of websites that have been talking about petulant borderlines, that they can use self-harm as a way to get people to do what they want. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case, it might very well be, but I know from my own experience there's been times where I've been so angry that the only release that there's been for me is to self-harm. And it's not necessarily because I thought, oh, I want this person to do this thing for me, so I'm going to hurt myself in this way and then they'll do it. So I'm not sure if that's the case. However, I do remember there was one time when I was 18, so 5 years ago, I was trialling my first antidepressant and it made me very, very poorly. I suffered really badly with the side effects. It was citalopram, and there was a time when I hadn't left the house in a couple of weeks. I lived on my own at the time. I hadn't left the house in a couple of weeks, and then I went to visit my mother, and I went to the bathroom, and when I came out she had left the house. So I was frantic, I was crying like a child, I didn't know where she'd gone. So I called her and I said to her, Mum, you need to come back, I can't be here on my own, I can't handle it, whatever, blah blah. Put the phone down, she said she'd be back when she was done. And I had completely been taken over by like this child version of myself that was so distressed, and it was awful. I was crying and I ended up self-harming. And I remember in that mindset I was like, I'm doing this because if I do this, if I hurt myself, then Mum has to come home because she has to look after me. So after I'd hurt myself, I won't go into details obviously, but after I'd hurt myself I then called my mum back up and said, you have to come home, I've hurt myself, you need to take me to the hospital. So in that case I can maybe understand that you could use self-harm as a way to get what you want, but I think in that case It doesn't make you a bad person. You're not doing it because you're a bad person. You're doing it because you are just so distressed about a situation and you don't know how to stop feeling distressed about the situation, or you don't know how to fix the situation, that you feel like the only option is for you to damage yourself for others to react in the way that you want them to. So maybe I can understand that. There might be some people watching this that might feel like offended by this subtype, but I think none of this is saying that you're a bad person. And I think people with BPD, I do it especially, I read things in a certain way and I can find it offensive when there's nothing there to actually cause offence. See, when I've read about this on websites, now that I'm thinking about it, sat here talking about it, the things like that I've said on websites, they've said they can use self-harm to get people to do what they want. Is that offensive? No, it's not. They're not saying this person is evil because they're doing this person is a horrible person because they're doing this. They're just saying they can use self-harm to get people to do what they want. And I've been in that situation, and I don't think I'm any worse of a person. I don't think I'm an evil person. I was just a very, very poorly girl at the time, so don't take it personally. I'm getting sidetracked anyway. We'll go on to the next one. So now I'm going to talk about my own particular subtype that I've been diagnosed with, and that is impulsive borderline. It's kind of self-explanatory. I'm sorry. This video is getting a bit long and I'm getting a bit painful. Oh, my hip's gonna come out. So like I said, this subtype is quite self-explanatory. People with this subtype tend to be very impulsive. They can make a lot of rash decisions and do a lot of things without putting much thought into it. So for me personally, I'm very impulsive when it comes to a lot of important life decisions like moving or relationships. I'm quite impulsive if it comes to starting or ending a relationship. The decoration in my house, I can get tired of it being a certain way, so one day I could just decide to completely change everything. And like I said in my BPD video before, I did one time buy a one plane? I didn't buy a plane, I wish I had the money to buy a plane. I bought a one-way ticket, plane ticket to Australia. So like people with discouraged borderline, impulsive borderlines are constantly seeking approval from other people, particularly people that are very important to us. So my boyfriend and my mother, I'm constantly sort of pushing them for reassurance that they love me and that they're proud of what I'm doing and things like that, which can get a bit annoying for them. It would be so nice to have someone say to me, you know, give me a compliment and for me to actually believe it, instead of pushing them like, do you really think that? Do you really think that though? But do you think that? But do you think that? You don't think that? Oh, you looked at me weird, you don't think that? No, it's a lie. But do you think it though? That's what I'm like with my boyfriend all the time. Bless him. And because we're wanting that approval from other people so much, we can put other people's needs and wants ahead of our own, because we want them to like us, basically. So when I was in work, a lot of the time I would get very sick because I was never really well enough to be at work. I was already working 40-hour weeks, and if someone came to me and said, look, we've got some shifts that need covering, would you do them? I'd always say yes, even though I knew that it would make me sick, because working too much for me just makes me very, very poorly. So there were some weeks where I remember one week I worked 70 hours just because I wanted this person to like me and to tell me what a star I was for covering these shifts for them. Impulsive borderlines can also be very prone to things like substance abuse and self-harm because we don't have very much impulse control. For me, I'm very lucky that I never really fell into the drinking or drugs or anything like that. For me, it was food. So to make myself feel better, I'd always be eating. I would never stop eating. And at one point, I got to about 20 stone. So the next and last subtype of BPD that I have to talk about is self-destructive borderline. And again, that is quite self-explanatory in the title itself. People with self-destructive borderline can have very poor self-care because they feel like no one else cares about them. So they kind of feel like if no one else cares about me, then why should I care about myself? So these people are very prone to depression, and obviously this feeling of why should I care about myself can often result in a lot of self-destructive behaviours. So even small things like they could have poor hygiene, have a poor diet, generally just a lot of depressive behaviour. They just don't feel like they're worth that care. So like the title suggests, they can be very prone to, you know, self-harm and, like I said, poor self-care methods, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse. And a lot of that is because a lot of the time they feel emotionally numb. They don't really feel anything and they don't feel like anyone cares about them, so they practice those kinds of behaviours to try and make them feel something. There isn't really much more to say about this subtype other than if you're listening to this and you think that you might fall under this subtype, then I know what I say to you isn't going to change how you feel, or you might remember it for the next 5 minutes, but then it might go. But I don't want this to come across as harsh, but I've been there myself, and the only reason that you're feeling unloved and you feel unworthy of love is because it's you that's telling yourself that you're not worthy of someone's love. So the only way to kind of get out of this pattern is to challenge yourself and start telling yourself, you know, even if it's just once every day, you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, I am worth love, I am worth something. Slowly over time, you will just one day wake up and you'll realise, you know what, yeah, I am worthy of love and I don't need to do all of these things to hurt myself because I don't deserve that. And I know it's hard to hear when you're in that mindset already. Kind of nothing that anyone says to you ever fixes it. You can't help yourself until you're ready to help yourself. But I just thought it was worth me mentioning that I used to be this subtype and I didn't care about myself at all, to the point where I wouldn't get out of bed. I would, because it's so hard to say. I didn't care about myself to the point where I cut myself off from all my friends and all my family. I didn't speak to anyone for months. I shut myself in my house. I didn't eat anything other than really unhealthy food, and as a result of that I became very sick. Most of the time I would stay in bed and just lie there. I wouldn't even get up to go to the toilet, so I'd go to the toilet in my room. I just didn't care about anything. And yes, there were things that I could have done that would have made myself feel a bit better, but I just thought, what was the point in doing them? And obviously that was also the time that my self-harm was at its peak. But if anyone, again, like I say, if anyone's listening to this and they feel like they fall into this subtype, just know that it doesn't have to last forever. And if you just keep telling yourself over and over again that you are worth it, then you'll slowly start to believe it. It doesn't happen overnight, it takes a very long time. It took me a good few years to get out of that mindset that it is possible. So now I've gone through all of the different subtypes, I just wanted to talk about kind of how my thoughts on them have changed as I've gone through it. So like I said, I was diagnosed with impulsive borderline, and I think very much I do fall into that category. But at the same time, I can see where in the past I have been a different subtype, and even now I feel like I do possess some qualities that some of the other subtypes do have. Although, like I've seen on websites, people say that you can change subtypes over time. I'm reading a lot of these subtypes and I'm thinking, well, I can be different subtypes at different times of the day, and like each day I can alternate between different subtypes. Although I do agree that for the most part I am impulsive. While I think it is useful to be able to break down BPD a little bit more, to understand people a little bit more, I don't know how useful it really is, because you can take on so many of the other different subtypes. So like I said, if you think you're any of these subtypes or you want to learn more about these subtypes, talk to your psychiatrist. I'm sorry if I've hurt anyone's feelings with this video, but I just thought it was worth getting it out there. Hopefully it can help people understand a little bit more about what they're going through. Just like I said 100 times already, don't take it to heart. This is only one theory, and psychology is changing all of the time. You know, this might be accurate for 2017, but come 2020 it might be completely irrelevant. So just bear that in mind. I hope it was useful to some of you, and like I always say, if you do ever want to talk about BPD or anything like that, you're always welcome to message me on Twitter. If this video's got you down, I'm really sorry. Go and grab a cup of tea, sit down. I was going to say under a nice snuggly blanket, but if you're in the UK, don't do that because the weather is gross today, it's very hot. Just do something nice for yourself. Try not to get too hung up on it, although I know you will, because I'm exactly the same. And when I first read about this, it did kind of shake me a little bit. So just go and do something nice for yourself. Paint your nails, buy yourself something. And I will share my little therapy dog with you to cheer you up. Look at the little puppy with the cute bow. Yay. See, you can't be sad now that you've seen a puppy, can you? And even if you don't find her bow cute, I bet you're pissing yourself looking at her. So, bye bye from us. Bye.